My husband, the CEO, believed his brother's lies and fired me without a thought. 3 days later he came asking if I'd learned my lesson. Instead I handed him divorce papers, and watched both him and his brother finally face the truth they built their empire on. "Have you learned your lesson yet, Hazel?" Jack's voice through the phone was so condescending, so sure of itself, that I actually pulled the device away from my ear to stare at it. 3 days. It had been 3 days since my husband, the CEO of the company I'd helped build, had security escort me from the building like a criminal, and now he was calling to ask if I'd learned my lesson? Before we continue, if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more people who need to know they're not alone. I looked down at the divorce papers spread across our kitchen counter, then at my laptop screen showing $2 million in fraudulent transactions his brother Levi had been hiding, and smiled. "Actually, Jack, I have. Why don't you come home early? We should talk." The line went quiet for a moment. I could picture him in his glass office, probably admiring himself in the reflection while Levi whispered poison in his ear. "Good," he finally said. "I'll be there at 6. I hope you're ready to be reasonable." Reasonable. The word echoed in my mind as I hung up. 3 days ago I'd been reasonable. 3 days ago I'd walked into that conference room expecting a normal meeting, maybe a discussion about quarterly projections or the Morrison Group contract we were pursuing. Instead I'd found my husband and his brother waiting like executioners. But I should have seen it coming. For the past month things had been shifting in ways I'd chosen to ignore. Jack had stopped including me in investor calls, claiming I needed to focus on the books, while he handled the vision. Board meetings suddenly became strategic sessions that didn't require the CFO's input. And Levi, had been everywhere despite joining only 6 months ago with zero tech experience beyond posting motivational quotes on LinkedIn. I walked to our kitchen window looking out at the Seattle skyline. From our downtown apartment on the 15th floor, I could see the Whitmore Technologies building 6 blocks away. 4 years ago Jack and I had signed the lease for our first tiny office on the 2nd floor of that building. We'd worked 18-hour days eating takeout on the floor because we couldn't afford furniture yet. I'd handled every invoice, every payment, every financial projection while Jack coded through the night, building the platform that would eventually secure us $12 million in funding. Our wedding photo sat on the counter, taken just 5 years ago. We looked so young, so certain that love and business could coexist. Jack's hand on my waist, my head tilted toward his shoulder, both of us grinning at something off camera. Probably my sister making inappropriate jokes to get us to relax. We'd written our vows the night before on cocktail napkins at the hotel bar, too overwhelmed to do it earlier. His had promised to always trust my judgment. Mine had promised to always have his back. Duke, our golden retriever, patted over and rested his head on my knee. He'd been doing that a lot the past 3 days, sensing something was wrong. Dogs always know. I'd adopted him 2 years ago when Jack had started working those 100-hour weeks, claiming I needed company. Really, I think I'd already sensed the loneliness creeping in. The apartment itself told the story of our rise. The exposed brick wall where we'd mapped out our business plan in dry erase marker, refusing to erase it even after we could afford proper whiteboards. The Italian leather couch Jack had insisted on buying with our first profit check. The kitchen island where we'd celebrated every milestone. Series of funding with champagne, our first major client with expensive whiskey, our biggest contract with Chinese food from the place that had been our regular spot during the lean times. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother, "Still expecting you for dinner Sunday. Jack coming this time." This would be the 4th Sunday he'd missed. The 3rd time I'd made excuses. Mom always made her famous pot roast, enough for leftovers because she knew Jack loved it reheated. Lately I'd been bringing home untouched containers, lying about Jack being stuck in meetings. The last time I'd gone 2 weeks ago, Mom had studied me with those eyes that had raised 3 daughters through every form of heartbreak. "A marriage without communication is like a business without cash flow," she'd said, slicing bread with deliberate precision. "Both are doomed to fail." I'd laughed it off, but she wasn't wrong. The communication breakdown had been gradual, then sudden. First, Jack stopped asking my opinion on hires. Then he started having quick syncs with Levi that lasted hours. Finally, last week when I discovered those suspicious consulting fees, $50,000 per month to companies I'd never heard of, he'd brushed me off entirely. Levi's handling vendor relationships now, he'd said, not even looking up from his phone. Focus on your assigned duties. Assigned duties. Like I was an employee, not his wife. Not the woman who'd invested her entire savings into this company. Not the CFO who'd kept us afloat when we had $3 in the business account and payroll due. I opened my laptop again, staring at the evidence Richard Dalton, my old accounting professor, had helped me compile. 18 months of systematic theft. Shell companies with generic names. Meridian Solutions, Apex Consulting, Innovative Partners. All traced back to accounts controlled by Levi. $2 million siphoned out while Levi convinced Jack that I was the threat. The irony was beautiful in its cruelty. They'd accused me of financial misconduct over 3 legitimate expense reports. Meanwhile, Levi had been stealing enough to buy a house in Seattle's current market. And Jack had believed him. Without question, without investigation, without even giving me a chance to defend myself. The security footage Patricia's investigator had found was the cherry on top. Levi entering my office at 10 p.m., accessing my computer, spending 45 minutes doing God knows what. The timestamp was 2 days before my performance review. 2 days before the ambush. I looked at the clock. 4:30 p.m. 90 minutes until Jack arrived, expecting tears and apologies. Instead, he'd find divorce papers and evidence of his brother's betrayal. The lesson I'd learned wasn't the one he expected. Duke whined softly and I scratched behind his ears. It's okay, boy, I whispered. After tonight, everything changes. The doorbell rang at 5:45 p.m. 15 minutes early. Of course Jack would arrive early to his own reckoning, still operating on CO time even for this. I smoothed my dress, the navy one he'd bought me for our 3rd anniversary, and walked to the door with Duke trailing behind me, his tail low, sensing the tension. Jack stood there in his Tom Ford suit, the charcoal one that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His face wore that particular expression of satisfied authority, the one he used after closing major deals. He genuinely believed he was coming here to accept my apology. Hazel, he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. The apartment was still half his after all. At least for now. Jack. He walked straight to the living room, glancing at the coffee table where I'd strategically placed nothing but a vase of fresh flowers. The divorce papers were tucked safely in the kitchen drawer. The laptop with Levi's fraud evidence was closed, innocuous on the counter. Not yet. Let him think he's winning first. I'm glad you've had time to think, he said, settling into his favorite leather chair, the one he'd insisted on buying even though it clashed with everything else. These past 3 days must have been difficult. Difficult. I almost laughed. 3 days ago had been difficult. 3 days ago had been devastating. 3 days ago went something like this. It had started at 8:47 a.m. on that Monday morning. I'd been reviewing payroll, making sure everyone would be paid on time despite the cash flow crunch from Levi's mysterious consulting fees. My coffee was still warm, Duke was napping under my desk, and I was thinking about suggesting we promote Jennifer from accounting. She'd been doing excellent work lately. Then the calendar notification popped up on my screen. Performance review mandatory. 9 a.m. 13 minutes notice. My husband, who slept beside me every night, who'd kissed me goodbye that very morning, had scheduled a mandatory performance review with 13 minutes notice. Not a text. Not a walk to my office 20 feet away. A formal calendar invitation through the company system. My hands had actually shaken as I clicked, accept. What else could I do? Decline my own execution? I'd walked to the conference room trying to convince myself this was about something else. Maybe the Morrison Group contract. Maybe a new investor concern. Maybe anything except what my gut was screaming. But when I opened that door and saw them, Jack at the head of the table where he always sat, Levi to his right in a designer suit that probably cost more than Jennifer's monthly salary, I knew. The smart glass windows were set to opaque, turning the room into a tomb. No witnesses. No accountability. Just the 3 of us and a thin manila folder centered on the sustainably sourced bamboo table I'd selected myself because it aligned with our company's eco-friendly image. Hazel, Jack had said, not honey, or babe, or even hey. Just Hazel, like I was any other employee. Please sit. Levi hadn't even tried to hide his satisfaction. He sat there with his hands folded, his Harvard class ring catching the light, looking like a cat who'd not just caught the canary but had already eaten it and was contemplating dessert. "We need to discuss some serious concerns about your conduct," Jack had continued, his voice carrying that CEO tone he'd practiced in the mirror when we first started the company. Back then we'd laughed about it together. "Pie conduct?" I'd actually been confused. "Jack, what is this about?" That's when he'd slid the folder across the table. The sound it made against the bamboo, that soft whisper of paper on wood, would haunt me for days. Inside were 3 expense reports. 3. The client dinner at Canlis for the Henderson Group. Jack had specifically told me to spare no expense on that one. The software purchase for our accounting system upgrade, which he'd approved via email with the words, "Get whatever you need to make this work." The conference registration for FinTech Forward, where he'd literally asked me to represent the company because he had a scheduling conflict. "These irregularities compromise the company's financial integrity," Levi had said, leaning forward like he was delivering devastating evidence instead of complete fabrication. "We can't have our CFO engaged in questionable expense practices." Questionable expense practices. 3 legitimate, approved expenses totaling less than $8,000, while his consulting fees were draining $50,000 monthly. "You're joking," I'd said, looking between them. "Jack, you personally approved every one of these expenses." "The board has lost confidence in your leadership," Jack had replied, not even acknowledging my words. Reading from a script. Levi's script, I realized later. "What board?" I'd asked. "We have 3 board members. You, me, and David Shin." Did David suddenly lose confidence in the CFO who's kept this company profitable for 4 years? "The decision has been made," Jack had said, finally meeting my eyes. And that's when I'd seen it. Nothing. No remorse, no conflict, no recognition of what he was doing. Just cold corporate efficiency, as if I hadn't held his hand through every failure, every setback, every moment of doubt when he wanted to quit. "Clean out your desk," Levi had added, already standing, already dismissing me. "Security will escort you." Security. Carlos and young Marcus were already waiting outside the conference room when I opened the door. They'd known. Everyone had known. The walk to my office, former office, had been the longest 50 feet of my life. Employees I'd hired, mentored, advocated for, all suddenly fascinated by their computer screens. Kelly at reception had actually been crying, the only honest person in the building. I'd packed 4 years into a cardboard box while Levi watched from the doorway. My Best Financial Leadership Award. I'd left that on the desk, right where he could see it every day. The photo of Duke, that went in the box. The stress ball shaped like a $sign that Jack had given me as a joke when we closed our first deal. I'd thrown that in the trash while maintaining eye contact with Levi. "This is a mistake," I'd told him quietly as Carlos walked me past the kitchen I'd stocked, the meditation room I'd suggested, the wall of achievements I'd helped earn. "The only mistake," Levi had replied, loud enough for everyone to hear, "was letting nepotism influence leadership decisions." Nepotism. The brother-in-law who'd been handed a C-suite position with no experience was lecturing me about nepotism. Now 3 days later, Jack sat in our living room waiting for my apology. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked, moving toward the kitchen. "I have your favorite Colombian blend." "That would be nice," he said, and for a moment his voice softened. "You always did make it perfectly." I turned on the machine, letting its familiar gurgle fill the silence while I opened the drawer with the divorce papers. "Not yet. First, let him taste his favorite coffee one more time in this apartment. Let him get comfortable in that ugly leather chair. Let him believe he'd won." The coffee maker finished brewing with its familiar beep. I poured Jack's Colombian blend into his favorite mug, the one from our honeymoon in Costa Rica, and carried it to him, my hands surprisingly steady. He took it without looking up from his phone, probably checking company metrics or maybe texting Levi about how this intervention was going. "Thank you," he said absently, then seemed to catch himself. "We should talk about your next steps." My next steps. I returned to the kitchen, gripping the counter until my knuckles went white, remembering how different I'd felt just 72 hours ago. That first day after the ambush, I hadn't even made it home before the shock hit. Carlos, the security guard, had helped me load the cardboard box into my car, his face full of sympathy he couldn't voice. I'd driven the 6 blocks to our apartment on autopilot, carried the box inside, and then just stopped. Right there in the entryway, still in my work clothes, holding 4 years of my professional life in a box that had once held printer paper. Duke had found me there an hour later, whimpering and nudging my leg with his nose. I'd sunk onto our leather couch, the one Jack insisted we needed for serious business discussions, and stayed there. Still in my blazer. Still in my heels. Still trying to process how my husband had looked straight through me like I was a stranger. The apartment had felt different that day. Like I was trespassing in someone else's life. Every surface held evidence of our shared existence. The awards on the mantel, both our names on the mortgage papers magnetized to the fridge. That silly photo from the company Christmas party where Jack wore the Santa suit and I dressed as his CFO elf. I'd pulled out our wedding album around midnight, Duke curled against my side. Page after page of promises. Jack's handwritten vows were tucked into the back cover. Hazel, you're not just my wife, you're my partner in everything. Every challenge, every success, every dream, we face it together. Together. The word had mocked me from that cream-colored paper. When exactly had together become you're terminated? The second day, Tuesday, everything shifted. Sadness crystallized into rage so pure it felt like electricity in my veins. I'd woken up at 4 a.m. still on the couch, Duke's worried face inches from mine. My phone showed 17 missed calls from my mother, 3 from my sister Emma, and absolutely nothing from Jack. That's when I'd started making calls of my own. Richard Dalton answered on the second ring, even though it was barely 6 a.m. Hazel, it's been years. How's the corporate world treating you? My husband just fired me from our own company, I'd said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. And I think his brother's been stealing from us. The pause was brief. Send me everything. Every document, every transaction, every email. When students become teachers, they'd better be ready for the lesson. Patricia Reeves had been next, recommended by Emma's friend who'd gone through a nightmare divorce. Patricia had answered with, Reeves Law, we destroy the deserving. I need a lawyer who isn't afraid of taking down a tech CEO, I'd said. Honey, I eat tech CEOs for breakfast. How soon can you get to my office? The third call had been to Rebecca Morrison, the journalist whose card had been sitting in my desk drawer for 3 months. She'd been investigating workplace discrimination in Seattle's tech scene and had reached out about an interview I'd politely declined. Ms. Morrison? This is Hazel Whitmore. That interview you wanted? I'm ready to talk. What changed? She'd asked, her journalist instincts already engaged. Everything. By Tuesday afternoon, Richard had already found irregularities. Hazel, these consulting fees, they're all going to shell companies. This is textbook embezzlement. Patricia had been equally enlightening. He fired you without board approval? Without documentation? Without cause? Oh, this is delicious. We're not just going to divorce him, we're going to professionally cremate him. But it was Tuesday evening when the universe delivered its own gift. Emma had texted me, have you seen Levi's LinkedIn? There was Levi, sitting at MY desk in MY office with MY view of Elliott Bay, posting about eliminating toxicity from leadership and making hard choices for company health. The photo showed him grinning like he'd won the lottery. Which, considering those fraudulent consulting fees, maybe he had. The comments section, however, had become a battlefield. Jennifer from accounting wrote, interesting perspective from someone who took credit for my financial model last month. Tom from engineering, toxic? Hazel was the only executive who actually listened to the team. Even Kelly, sweet Kelly from reception, had commented, some people know the price of everything and the value of nothing. But the best comment came from David Chin, a developer Levi had fired 2 months ago. This is the same guy who tried to expense his girlfriend's spa weekend as a team-building exercise. The toxicity was coming from inside the house. I'd screenshotted everything, my phone pinging as more employees, current and former, added their stories. Patricia would love this. Rebecca would have a field day. By Wednesday evening I'd assembled everything. The divorce papers Patricia had drawn up were beautiful in their simplicity. Irreconcilable differences, equitable distribution of assets, and a small note about fiduciary duty that would become very important later. Richard's forensic analysis was damning. $2 million siphoned over 18 months through 3 shell companies, all traceable to accounts Levi controlled. Rebecca's draft article was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, featuring testimonials from 12 former employees about Whitmore Technologies' toxic leadership. I was reviewing it all at our kitchen island when Jack had called. 3 days of silence, and now he wanted to check if I'd learned my lesson. The arrogance of it. The absolute certainty in his voice that I would crumble, apologize, beg for forgiveness. "I'm glad you're ready to be reasonable about this," Jack was saying now from his chair, bringing me back to the present moment. He'd finished half his coffee, completely unaware of the tsunami of consequences waiting in my kitchen drawer. "Levi thinks we might be able to find you a position in another department. Maybe accounting support." Accounting support. From CFO to accounting support. In the company I'd helped build. "That's very generous," I said, my voice honey-sweet. "Should we discuss terms?" "Terms." Jack set down his coffee mug, leaning forward with that negotiator's gleam in his eye. "I think you'll find we're being more than fair considering the circumstances." "Considering the circumstances," I repeated, standing up slowly. "That's an interesting phrase, Jack. Let me go change into something more appropriate for negotiations." I walked to our bedroom, leaving him there with his confidence and his coffee. My hands were steady as I opened the closet and pulled out my best business suit, the charcoal Armani I'd worn to our Series B presentation. The one that made me look like exactly what I was. A chief financial officer who knew her worth. As I buttoned the jacket, I could hear Jack on the phone in the living room. Probably updating Levi, telling him I was being reasonable. Let them think that for 5 more minutes. I returned to the living room transformed. Not the grieving wife in yesterday's clothes anymore, but the woman who'd helped build a $12 million company. Jack's eyes widened slightly. He hadn't expected this. "Before we discuss terms," I said, walking to the kitchen with deliberate calm, "I think we should review some documents." From the drawer, I retrieved the divorce papers, Patricia's letterhead gleaming with expensive gravity. I placed them on our coffee table, centered precisely where Jack couldn't ignore them. Next came my laptop, already open to Richard's forensic analysis. Finally, 2 glasses and the bottle of Macallan 18, the scotch Jack saved for closing major deals. "What is this?" Jack's voice had lost its confident edge. "Due diligence," I said, pouring the scotch with ritualistic precision. 2 fingers each, no ice, the way he taught me to appreciate good whiskey. "You always said every negotiation should start with complete transparency." I set his glass beside him, then sat across from him on the ottoman, the same spot where he'd knelt 5 years ago with a ring and promises of forever. Jack's eyes were locked on the divorce papers. "Hazel, this is necessary," I finished. "But that's not the interesting part. This is." I turned my laptop toward him. Richard's spreadsheet filled the screen, 18 months of data compressed into damning columns and rows. "Meridian Solutions," I began, my voice clinical. $50,000 monthly for consulting services. Incorporated in Delaware 6 months ago. The registered agent? A law firm that specializes in anonymous LLC formation. But here's where it gets interesting. I clicked to the next tab. Bank records. Meridian's payments go to an account at First National. That account signature card? Your brother Levi's writing is quite distinctive. Jack's hand reached for the scotch. Stopped. Pull back. Apex Consulting Group, I continued. Another $50,000 monthly. Same incorporation date. Same registered agent. Different bank, same signature. That's not. Levi said these were legitimate vendors. Did he? Then I'm sure he can provide the contracts. The deliverables. The work product. I clicked again. Innovative Partners LC. This one's special. $100,000 every quarter for strategic advisory services. The address they provided? It's a UPS store in Bellevue. Jack's face was doing something fascinating, like watching a building's demolition in slow motion, each support beam failing in sequence. $2 million, Jack. Over 18 months. While you were firing me for $8,000 in legitimate expenses you personally approved. This can't be right. Richard Dalton verified every transaction. Remember Richard? You met him at our wedding. Told him how lucky you were to marry someone who understood numbers. Jack grabbed the scotch, then downing half in one swallow. His hand shook slightly. But wait, I said, pulling up another file. There's more. Patricia's investigator. You remember Patricia Reeves? The lawyer who took down Morrison Industries for fraud? She's representing me now. Anyway, her investigator found something fascinating. The video file opened. Security footage from our office, timestamp clear. October 5th, 10:47 p.m. 2 days before my performance review. That's Levi, I narrated unnecessarily as we watched his brother enter my office using his master key card. And that's my computer he's accessing. The footage showed Levi at my desk for 43 minutes. The quality was good enough to see him inserting a USB drive, typing, clicking through files with practiced efficiency. October 7th, 9 a.m., I said. You presented me with doctored expense reports as evidence of my misconduct. Reports that Levi had modified on October 5th at 10:47 p.m. Jack set down his glass hard enough to crack. No. Yes. Levi wouldn't, he's my brother. He's your brother who's been stealing from our company while convincing you to fire the person most likely to catch him. I pulled up my original expense reports, the ones I'd submitted months ago, alongside the doctored versions Levi had created. The alterations were subtle but damning. Amounts changed, descriptions modified, approval emails mysteriously absent. Look at this one, I said, zooming in. The Canlis dinner with the Henderson Group. I submitted it for $1,847. Normal for a 5-person dinner at Seattle's priciest restaurant. Levi's version? $4,847. A simple digit change but enough to look excessive. Stop. Jack's voice was barely a whisper. The software purchase? I bought the standard package for $2,400. Levi's version shows the enterprise package at $12,400. Same vendor, different tier, and suddenly I look like I'm wasting money. Stop. The conference registration? He added a first-class flight and 5-star hotel to make it look like. Stop. Jack stood abruptly, pacing to the window. His reflection in the glass looked like a ghost of the confident man who'd walked in an hour ago. How long have you known? He asked. 3 days. Richard found it Tuesday morning. Patricia's investigator got the footage Tuesday night. Rebecca Morrison finished her article Wednesday afternoon. Rebecca Morrison? The journalist. The one investigating workplace discrimination in tech. She's been very interested in Levi's management style. Did you know he's been taking credit for Jennifer's financial models? Or that he tried to expense his girlfriend's spa weekend? Jack turned from the window. His face was gray. I need to call Levi. Go ahead. Ask him about Meridian Solutions. Ask him why he needed $2 million badly enough to destroy my career. Ask him why he was so eager to become CEO of a company he's been robbing. Jack pulled out his phone, then stopped. You recorded this. You're recording me now. I'm not. But it doesn't matter. The FBI will be doing their own recording soon enough. The FBI? I stood, moving to stand beside him at the window. Outside, Seattle's skyline glittered in the evening light. Somewhere out there, Levi was probably celebrating his successful coup, maybe spending some of that stolen money. $2 million in embezzlement tends to interest federal investigators, I said quietly. Patricia filed the report yesterday. Jack stood frozen at our window, his phone halfway to his ear, as if calling Levi might somehow undo what I'd just shown him. The Seattle skyline blurred with approaching rain clouds, and I watched his reflection wrestle with the truth he couldn't unsee. I need to go, he said finally, his voice hollow. I need to think. The divorce papers are on the table, I said quietly. Patricia's contact information is attached. He walked past the coffee table, paused, then picked up the papers with trembling hands. You had this all planned. No, Jack. You planned this when you chose to believe Levi over me. I just responded accordingly. He left without another word, the door clicking shut with a finality that echoed through the apartment. Duke emerged from the bedroom where he'd been hiding, tail wagging cautiously, and pressed against my leg. It's done, boy, I whispered, scratching his ears. How we wait. I barely slept that night, my mind racing through everything that would happen next. At 5:45 a.m., my phone erupted like a digital volcano. Notification after notification flooded my screen. Texts, emails, LinkedIn messages, even a few Facebook notifications from people I hadn't spoken to since college. Rebecca's article had gone live. The headline read, How Whitmore Technologies CEO fired his wife to cover his brother's embezzlement. The subheading was even better. A $2 million fraud hidden behind false accusations. I opened the article with shaking fingers. Rebecca had crafted a masterpiece. She'd woven together Richard's forensic analysis with testimonies from 12 former employees, each one painting a picture of Levi's toxic management and Jack's willful blindness. Jennifer from accounting was quoted. Hazel was the only executive who actually understood our concerns. Levi took credit for my work 3 times, and when I complained, he suggested I wasn't a team player. My phone rang. Pisha. Good morning, sunshine, she said, sounding far too cheerful for Dawn. Ready for the show? What show? Emergency board meeting at 8. David Shin called it after reading Rebecca's article at midnight. They're live streaming it to all employees for transparency. Ironic considering Jack's whole brand. Can we watch? Already set up in my office. Bring coffee. The good stuff. I threw on jeans and a sweater, grabbed Duke's leash, and stopped at the expensive coffee place Jack loved. One last time. The barista, a young woman named Amy who knew our orders by heart, looked at me with wide eyes. Miss Whitmore, I saw the article. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, I said, accepting the 2 lattes. And it's just Hazel now. Patricia's office occupied the corner of a historic building overlooking Pike Place Market. Her assistant, a sharp young man named Marcus, had already set up the live stream on the conference room's main screen. This is better than Netflix, Patricia said, taking her coffee. David Shin is furious. Apparently, Jack never told him about firing you. The live stream began at exactly 8 a.m. The boardroom I knew so well filled the screen. The same sustainably sourced bamboo table, the same ergonomic chairs, but the atmosphere was different. David Shin, usually calm and measured, looked ready to breathe fire. The other board member, Sandra Williams from our venture capital firm, appeared equally grim. Jack sat at his usual spot, but his commanding presence had evaporated. Beside him, Levi fidgeted in his designer suit, pulling at his collar like it was strangling him. Gentlemen, David began, his voice arctic. Would either of you like to explain why I had to learn about the CFO's termination from a news article? David, the situation is complicated, Jack started. It's not complicated, Sandra interrupted. You fired a founding member and board observer without board approval. That alone violates our governance agreements. She was engaging in financial misconduct, Levi said, his voice pitched too high. David pulled out his tablet. According to this forensic analysis, the only financial misconduct involves $2 million in payments to shell companies linked to you, Levi. The blood drained from Levi's face so fast I thought he might faint. That's being taken out of context, he stammered. Really? Sandra pulled up her laptop. Meridian Solutions. Apex Consulting. Innovative Partners. Would you like to provide the contracts for these vendors? The deliverables? Literally any documentation beyond invoices. Silence. Furthermore, David continued, we've received 17 complaints about your management style in the past 6 months. HR never forwarded them to the board. Curious. My phone buzzed. Mom, are you watching? Come home. Now. 20 minutes later, I was in Mom's kitchen, Duke at my feet, while she ladled homemade chicken noodle soup into bowls despite it being 9 a.m. You need to eat, she said, her hands steady as always. Revenge requires energy. Mom, this isn't about revenge. She sat across from me, her eyes, the same green as mine, studying my face. Your father's brother once betrayed him. Did I ever tell you that story? I shook my head. They ran a hardware store together. Your Uncle Ted was stealing inventory, selling it on the side. When your father found out, Ted convinced the whole family that your father was paranoid, jealous. Your grandparents sided with Ted. What did Dad do? He walked away. Started his own store across town. Built it bigger, better, more successful. Ted's store failed within 2 years. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Your father's revenge wasn't destroying Ted. It was succeeding without him. Building something better. I just wanted justice, Mom. Justice and revenge aren't mutually exclusive, sweetheart. Sometimes they're the same thing with different PR. My phone buzzed again. Multiple texts from former coworkers. They're suspending Jack and Levi. FBI just showed up. News vans everywhere. I ran to Mom's living room window. Even from Queen Anne we could see the Whitmore Technologies building downtown. 3 black SUVs were parked outside. As we watched, employees began streaming out, some on their phones, others gathering in confused clusters. Then at 11:47 a.m. it happened. The glass doors opened and Levi emerged, flanked by 2 federal agents. His designer suit looked absurd next to their practical windbreakers. His hands were behind his back, handcuffed. Photographers materialized from nowhere, their cameras clicking like hungry insects. Mom stood beside me, her arm around my shoulders. How do you feel? I watched Levi being guided into an SUV, his perfect hair messed up for once, his arrogant expression replaced by sheer terror. Empty, I admitted. I thought I'd feel triumphant or vindicated. But I just feel empty. Empty is normal, Mom said, still holding me as we watched the news vans multiply outside Whitmore Technologies. When you expect catharsis and get hollow victory instead, that's when you know you're human. Duke whined at our feet and I realized I'd been gripping Mom's hand too tight. I let go, walked to her couch and finally noticed my phone, silent for the first time all morning. 43 missed calls from Jack. 4 from an unknown number that was probably Levi. And 1 voicemail from Patricia marked urgent. I should go, I said, but Mom shook her head. Listen to them first. All of them. You need to hear who he really is when he's desperate. I put the phone on speaker. Jack's first message, left at midnight after he'd left our apartment. Hazel, we need to talk about this rationally. Your accusations are serious, but I think we're both too emotional right now. Call me back. The second at 2 a.m., I've been going through the documents. Some of this might be a misunderstanding. Levi says there are explanations. Please just talk to me. By message 15 around 4 a.m. his tone had shifted. You've destroyed everything. Do you understand that? The company, our reputation, everything we built. Message 23 6 a.m. I'm sorry. God, Hazel, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Levi got in my head and please call me back. Message 35 after the FBI arrived. They took Levi. They actually arrested him. This is insane. Hazel, please, we can fix this. We can still save the company. I'll make you see full control. Just please answer. Message 43 just 20 minutes ago. I love you. I know I destroyed everything, but I love you. Please. Mom poured herself tea with steady hands. Notice how he never once said he was wrong about firing you? Just sorry about the consequences. The unknown number's voicemail was Levi, his voice high and shaky. Hazel, it's Levi. They're holding me downtown. Listen, Jack made me do this. He said if I didn't help him get you out, he'd fire me too. I have emails, conversations he doesn't know I recorded. I can help you bury him if you help me with bail. Please, I know we haven't gotten along, but we can work together on this. Call me back. Actually laughed. He's trying to flip on Jack. They're both trying to blame each other. My phone rang again. Fisha. Perfect timing, she said. Can you meet downtown in an hour? The Montgomery Group wants to meet with you. The Montgomery Group? 3 venture capitalists who just pulled their funding from Whitmore. They want to discuss backing your new venture. I don't have a new venture. You will after this meeting. The conference room at Montgomery Ventures had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Sound. 3 people sat across from me. Sarah Montgomery, whose silver hair and Armani suit couldn't hide the shark beneath. James Chin, young and eager with an iPad full of notes. And Monica Rivera, who'd built and sold 2 companies before turning to investment. Ms. Whitmore, Sarah began, then caught herself. I apologize, Ms. Hazel. We've been following the situation at Whitmore Technologies. The implosion, you mean? I said. Monica smiled. That's what we appreciate. Your directness. No corporate doublespeak. We pulled our Series C funding this morning, James added, swiping through his iPad. $8 million that was supposed to close next week. But we don't want to lose our investment in you, Sarah leaned forward. Your forensic work uncovering the fraud was impressive. Patricia Reeves says you built an airtight case in 3 days. Where are you going with this? Fraud prevention consulting, Monica said simply. Companies need someone who understands both the numbers and the psychology. Someone who's lived through it. You want me to monetize my trauma? We want you to weaponize your expertise, Sarah corrected. There's a difference. They laid out their vision. A consulting firm specializing in forensic accounting and fraud prevention. They'd provide $2 million in seed funding, connections to potential clients and office space in their building. Why would you trust me? I asked. My husband just accused me of embezzlement. Falsely accused, James said. After you discovered his brother's actual embezzlement. That's not a liability, it's your origin story. My phone buzzed. Another call from the detention center. This time I answered. Hazel. Levi's voice was desperate. Thank God. Listen, I know. Stop. Are you recording this? Pause. No. Levi, you stole $2 million and framed me for it. Jack told me to. He said you were getting too powerful, that you'd push him out eventually. He said if I helped him remove you, he'd make me permanent, so. And you believed him? He's my brother. And I was his wife. How'd that work out? Silence. Then, I can testify against him. Say it was all his idea. But it wasn't, was it? The shell companies were your idea. Jack just didn't stop you. Another pause. How did you know? Because Jack's not smart enough for that level of fraud. He's got vision and coding skills, but complex financial schemes? That's all you. I can still help you. No, Levi. You can help yourself by pleading guilty and hoping for a reduced sentence. Goodbye. I hung up feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no anger. Just tired. 2 weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, document reviews, and planning sessions with Montgomery Ventures. I'd moved into Emma's guest room temporarily, unable to face the apartment's memories. Duke adjusted quickly, claiming her couch as his own. Then on a Thursday evening, Jack showed up at Emma's building. The doorman called up, uncertain. He says he has something of yours, Emma relayed, her expression skeptical. I found Jack in the lobby looking like a ghost of himself. His usually perfect hair was unkempt, his clothes wrinkled. He was holding our wedding album. You left this, he said quietly. On purpose. Can we talk? 5 minutes. Emma's lobby had a sitting area near the window. We sat on opposite ends of a modern couch that was more style than comfort. I know you hate me, he started. I don't hate you, Jack. That would require caring. He flinched. I deserve that. You deserve prison time, but Levi's taking the fall alone. I didn't know about the money. I swear I didn't know. But you knew something was wrong. You knew Levi was poison and you chose him anyway. He opened the album to a photo from our reception. Us laughing at something, cake frosting on my nose. Did you ever really love me? He asked. I stared at the photo in Jack's trembling hands. Us laughing, frosting on my nose, his eyes crinkled with genuine joy. A lifetime ago. Love without trust is just shared delusion, Jack, I said, standing up. We had the delusion. Never the trust. I left him there in Emma's lobby with the album, walking away without looking back. The elevator doors closed on the image of him hunched over our memories, and I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not regret. Just forward motion. 6 weeks later, I sat in federal court for the sentencing. The courtroom smelled like old wood and disappointment, filled with reporters, former employees, and curious strangers who'd followed the story. I chose the front row of the gallery, close enough to see every expression, every flinch of recognition as consequences finally arrived. Levi entered first, his designer suits replaced with a basic gray outfit that made him look younger, smaller. His lawyer, a public defender who looked exhausted, guided him to the defendant's table. No more Harvard rings, no more entitled swagger. Just a scared man who'd gambled everything and lost. Judge Catherine Walsh, a woman known for her intolerance of white-collar criminals who thought themselves clever, reviewed her notes with theatrical slowness. Mr. Levi Whitmore, you've pled guilty to 18 counts of embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy to defraud investors. Do you have anything to say? Levi stood, his voice barely audible. I made terrible mistakes. I betrayed people who trusted me. I'm sorry. Mistakes, Judge Walsh repeated, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. You systematically stole $2 million while orchestrating the termination of an innocent employee to cover your crimes. These weren't mistakes, Mr. Whitmore. They were choices. She delivered the sentence with clinical precision. 5 years federal prison, 3 years supervised release, full restitution of stolen funds, and a permanent ban from serving in any fiduciary capacity. Levi's legs gave out. He had to grip the table to stay standing. Then Jack's turn came. He entered looking hollow, his suit hanging loose on his frame. He'd lost weight, his face gaunt where it had once been confident. He pled guilty to negligent oversight and breach of fiduciary duty. Lesser charges that Patricia said reflected his ignorance rather than malice. Mr. Jack Whitmore, Judge Walsh began, your failure to provide proper oversight enabled a massive fraud. Your termination of a board member without authorization violated corporate governance laws. While you may not have stolen money yourself, your negligence and ego destroyed a company and damaged dozens of lives. Jack's voice cracked when he spoke. I accept full responsibility. I failed everyone who believed in me. 2 years probation, the judge announced. 500 hours of community service and a lifetime ban from serving as an officer or director of any public company. A lifetime ban. Jack's identity as CO, the title he'd worn like armor, stripped away forever. As they led Levi out in custody, our eyes met for 1 second. He mouthed something, maybe sorry, maybe something else, but I looked through him like he was glass. He didn't exist for me anymore. The next morning I sat in Montgomery Ventures conference room with Sarah, Patricia, and 3 other lawyers, signing papers that felt like rebirth. Whitmore Technologies stock had crashed to 10% of its peak value. With Montgomery's backing, I was buying Jack's shares for pennies on the dollar. Congratulations, Sarah said as I signed the final page. You now own 68% of what's left. What's left? A company hemorrhaging talent, abandoned by investors, tainted by scandal. Perfect raw material for transformation. First order of business, I announced. New name. Phoenix Financial Solutions. Rising from ashes? Patricia smirked. A bit on the nose. Truth in advertising, I replied. The building felt different when I walked in the next week as majority owner. Same marble lobby, same elevators, but the energy had shifted. Employees who'd hidden during my humiliation now stood straighter, nodded with respect instead of pity. Kelly still manned reception. Welcome back, Ms. What should I call you? Hazel's fine, Kelly. Just Hazel. My old office, Levi's brief throne room, still reeked of his cologne. I opened every window, letting Seattle's rain-touched air cleanse the space. His motivational posters went in the trash. Disrupt or be disrupted. Move fast and break things. Competition is for losers. Corporate scripture for narcissists. Jack's vanity wall came down next. His Stanford degree, his 40 under 40 plaque, photos of him with minor celebrities at tech conferences. I kept one thing. A small frame with our original business plan handwritten on a napkin. A reminder of when the dream was pure before ego poisoned it. The smart glass got replaced with regular windows. Transparency shouldn't be adjustable based on convenience. My mother's photo went on the desk. Her at her own college graduation, proof that strength runs in bloodlines. Next to it, a simple wooden plaque I'd commissioned, truth in numbers, integrity in leadership. Jennifer knocked on the door. The remaining staff wants to know if they should look for other jobs. Tell them this. Everyone who worked here before Levi arrived keeps their position. Anyone who enabled him can collect their severance and leave. We're rebuilding with people who value competence over connections. That afternoon 18 people resigned. Good riddance. The 70 who remained were the ones who'd actually built things, who'd coded and calculated and created while the brothers played Empire. David Shin called that evening. Hazel, what you've accomplished is remarkable. But revenge. This isn't revenge, David. Revenge would be destroying everything. I'm salvaging what they nearly ruined. The distinction matters. Everything matters when you're building on ruins. That night in Emma's guest room, I sat on the bed with Duke beside me looking at my phone. Jack had sent one last text. I lost everything that mattered. My thumb hovered over it. I could respond, offer closure, perhaps even kindness. Instead I deleted it. Not with anger or spite, but with the calm certainty that some conversations are finished before the last word is spoken. Duke nudged my hand and I scratched behind his ears. We did it, boy. We actually did it. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't revenge or justice or even vindication. It was simpler and harder than all of that. It was indifference. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's the absence of feeling anything at all. Tomorrow I'd walk into Phoenix Financial Solutions and begin the real work of building something worthwhile. Tonight I sat in a borrowed room with my dog, feeling neither triumphant nor broken. Just ready. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, Seattle's signature welcome. I dressed carefully, black slacks, white blouse, the blazer Mom had given me for courage, and drove to Phoenix Financial Solutions for the first time as its true leader. Not a wife filling in, not a CFO keeping books, but the majority owner of something I would build right. 6 months passed in what felt like 6 heartbeats. We landed our first major client when Boeing needed someone to audit their vendor relationships after their own fraud scandal. Then Microsoft called, then Amazon. Companies wanted someone who'd lived through the fire and could smell smoke before it became flame. The Puget Sound Business Alliance announced their annual awards in September. When the invitation arrived for the Ethical Business Leadership Award, I almost threw it away. Awards felt like Jack's world. Validation hunting, reputation building, ego feeding. But Jennifer convinced me otherwise. "You need to go," she said, now my chief operating officer. "Not for you. For everyone who watched you get marched out and wants to see you rise." The ceremony was held at the Fairmont Olympic. All crystal chandeliers and old Seattle money. I wore the same charcoal suit from the day I'd confronted Jack with divorce papers. My armor, my reminder. Walking to the podium, I passed faces I recognized from the old days. Venture capitalists who'd funded Jack's ego. Executives who'd praised his vision while I balanced the books in his shadow. Hazel Blackwood, the presenter announced, using my maiden name I'd reclaimed. Founder and CEO of Phoenix Financial Solutions, for demonstrating that ethical leadership isn't about perfection but about accountability, transparency, and the courage to rebuild with integrity. My speech was brief. I thanked my team, the 70 people who'd stayed when everything collapsed. I thanked my mother for teaching me that strength isn't about never falling but about how you stand back up. I didn't mention Jack or Levi by name, but everyone knew. Sarah Montgomery told me later that Jack had watched the live stream from his studio apartment in Ballard. His presence reduced to a viewer count. Anonymous number 847 of 900 people watching online. 2 days later, Mom requested lunch at her favorite restaurant, the little Italian place in Wallingford where she'd taken us for every birthday, report card, and life crisis. "I want you to meet someone," she said, which immediately set off alarms. Mom didn't do setups. But David Chen wasn't a romantic ambush. He was another entrepreneur running a sustainable packaging company, who'd gone through his own business betrayal 5 years ago. "Your mom's been telling me about Phoenix," he said over bruschetta. "I could use a forensic audit." My last business partner turned out to be creative with the books. How creative? Creative enough that I now require written documentation for everything, including lunch orders. Mom squeezed my hand under the table. "Your father would be proud," she said quietly. "Building something honest from dishonest destruction. That's the best kind of justice." We worked together professionally for months, David and I. He understood why I needed 3 signatures on every check, why I recorded certain meetings, why trust for me was earned in increments, not assumed through proximity or promises. Eventually, those professional dinners became something else, but that's a different story. A year after the sentencing, I was buying my morning coffee at the place near our new offices. We'd moved to a larger space in South Lake Union, 48 employees now and growing. I was reading emails on my phone, Duke waiting patiently beside me. The coffee shop had a dog-friendly policy, when I heard a familiar voice order. "Large Colombian, no sugar, oat milk." Jack stood 3 feet away, thinner, his hair more gray than brown now, wearing jeans and a Seattle startup hoodie. Freelance coder uniform. He saw me at the same moment I saw him. Time stopped. The coffee shop noise faded. We stood there, 2 people who'd once promised each other forever, now strangers who shared only history. He looked older but somehow lighter, like failing had lifted weight he didn't know he'd been carrying. His wedding ring was gone. I'd noticed that immediately, though mine had been gone for a year. "Hazel." "Jack." Duke, traitor that he was, wagged his tail. He remembered Jack, remembered better times, or maybe dogs just don't hold grudges the way humans do. "He looks good," Jack said, gesturing to Duke. "Happy." "We both are." Jack nodded slowly, accepting that. I heard about Phoenix. About the Boeing contract. That's impressive. It's honest work. He flinched but didn't argue. I'm coding for startups now. Actually building things instead of just talking about building things. That's good. We stood there, awkward but not hostile. The barista called his name. He collected his coffee, started to leave, then turned back. Hazel, the thing you built, it's what we should have built. What I was too proud and too stupid to see we could build. He left before I could respond. I watched him walk away through the rain-streaked windows, shoulders hunched against the Seattle drizzle, and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even satisfaction. Just acknowledgement that we'd both become different people, and maybe that was the only ending that mattered. That evening I stood in my office, twice the size of my old one, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Sound. Duke slept at my feet, occasionally twitching with dog dreams. The city lights reflected off the water like promises kept, like truth finally told. My assistant knocked. The Tokyo call is in 10 minutes. Thanks, Marcus. We were going international. Phoenix Financial Solutions was consulting for companies across the Pacific now, teaching them how to build frameworks that caught fraud before it flowered. My tragedy had become curriculum, my pain transformed into prevention for others. I looked at the plaque on my desk. Truth in numbers, integrity in leadership. Such simple words for such a complicated journey. Jack and Levi had built their empire on brotherhood and betrayal, on ego and embezzlement. It fell because lies make terrible foundations. What I built would last because authentic foundations don't crack under pressure. They get stronger. If this story of betrayal and justice kept you hooked until the end, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Hazel revealed the $2 million fraud evidence while Jack sat there expecting an apology. What was your favorite moment of revenge? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more gripping stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.